Are you looking for a game that's fast-paced and easy to learn? One that doesn't require a second mortgage just to get started in? And a game that you can tell fun, evocative stories when just playing games with your mates? Well, join me as I take a journey to discover whether Frostgrave is indeed the best fantasy skirmish game out there. I'm Peachy, and this is Peachy Tips. Cheers. Now, there are a lot of opinions out there as to what makes a great rule set. Whether that's a strong, robust game engine that you can't deviate from because, you know, it's competitive play, match play, whatever, and it is word as written. Or there's the games that are a bit more story-driven and a little bit loosey-goosey with the rules, and it's more the flavour that you're going for. I mean, it's entirely up to you, whatever you're going for at that moment in time. I kind of deviate between a few. I mean, Star Wars Shatterpoint, for example, is probably more competitively written, but I still enjoy that, and I play it from a competitive point of view, but I'm still probably chilled out because I don't win many games. Whereas Warcry Middle-earth strategy battle game, very much designed as match play, but also you can get some great narrative in there as well. So where does Frostgrave sit into all of this? It's definitely not a competitive rule set, so it's going to fall into that story-driven narrative side of things. And looking through the book, it's definitely that. For me, I like the kind of game where it feels like you're playing a sandbox computer game, you create your own character and you go off on adventures and the story kind of develops as you're playing. Obviously the scenarios help that along as well, but really it's about you telling your own story, whereas match play games tend to be just like, this is the objective, smash your opponent until they're dead, which is great as well. Some people really like that. I like to tell a story. There's going to be a fair few of you that are going to be shouting at the telly right now. I've not played a single game of Frostgrave yet. I've read through the rules. I've made warbands based on that. But I've only recently discovered this game. Now, it's been out for like 10 years at least. And I've only recently discovered. And that came about, I did a little Warcry video about, is Warcry the best game? I did that on the painting phase, and there was lots of comments about Peachy. Frostgrave is amazing. Warcry is okay, but Frostgrave is amazing. You need to play Frostgrave. And I was like, what's Frostgrave? So I got introduced into the rules writing of Frostgrave by Joseph's awesome game, which is The Silver Bayonet. Now, this video is about Frostgrave entirely, obviously, but I'm just going to throw Silver Bayonet in there. So that I like Napoleonics. I like my historicals. I also like fantasy games. And I discovered this game, which is like horror, Napoleonics. You don't need many figures. But the rule system was really interesting because you don't need many figures, you just handpick cool characters, you don't even have to care about history. And instantly, before I even played a game, I'd made like 3 warbands in my head. I was like, this is cool, I love this. I'm going to start like, come up with some ideas of a British warband, I'm going to come up with some ideas of a French warband, this, that, and the other. And I think that's testament to the author and the game mechanic that I'm already excited and I've not played a game yet. And that's very true with Frostgrave because I've not played a single game. I played one game, a solo game of Silver Bayonet, just to learn the rules. Doesn't really matter if I don't play any more games of it. I will, but that's testament to the game system. Frostgrave, not played a game. I've got a bunch of the rule sets and the add-on packs. And I've made 2 warbands and completely painted them, and a 3rd one on the way. And I think that's testament to games designing by Joseph because it gets you hooked in without even knowing how the game works. That's very clever. Guy's a marketing genius is what he is. So that is something to be said about a game that you don't have to play a single game. You can just look at it and go, this is cool. I'm going to make a bunch of warbands, which is exactly what I've done. I got hooked in, Joe. I got hooked in. Well done. So I think it's about how the game's pitched. So Frostgrave, as well as the Silver Bayonet and Stargrave, I'll throw that in there as well, are small warband skirmish games where you have a handful of figures. Obviously he's written loads of other games as well, but these are the kind of games that are very easy to get into. You don't need a lot of figures. At most you need 10 figures. So Stargrave, Frostgrave is like a warband or a crew of 10, whereas Silver Bayonet is 8. So the entry level is minimum, and it's model agnostic as well. So you can use whatever you want. You don't have to be like brand loyal and go, well, it's a workshop game, I have to use workshop models, especially if I'm playing in store or at tournaments and this and that. But it doesn't matter. They're not interested in that when they come to like making these model agnostic games. It's what you've got, have fun. There are some amazing models, granted, that are Stargrave, Frostgrave, Silver Bayonet. You can get those all from North Star Military Figures, but you can also just make your own. I'm just going to go on a bit of a divergence about the figures as well. So I like making and kit bashing my own characters and warriors, as you can see by the warbands I've done. The warbands I've done have used the actual plastic sets that come from North Star, so the Frostgrave sets themselves. I've got a bunch of them, so like the soldiers, the knights, there's like all sorts of wizards, obviously. But you can kit bash them, mash them together, and that's something I think is missed a bit these days, because I really like being able to just get a sprue of figures and then just have interchangeable heads, interchangeable arms. You kind of get that a bit with some workshop kits, but most of them nowadays they build one way and that's it, and you have to be happy with it. Great sculpted models, don't get me wrong, they're beautiful figures to look at, but for someone like me who likes to just swap heads and swap arms and have different choices, that's what I like about these models. And it's the same that goes with the Stargrave stuff as well. They've got so many kits out there for that game system as well as Frostgrave that I think you could have unlimited combinations pretty much of how you want to go about making your warband. And that really gets my juices going, if you like. Being able to just look at a sprue and go, ooh, look at the 25 heads and the 5,000 arm options that you've got, as well as random like pouches, bottles. I mean, they're not the most overly complex, detailed figures in the world. They have robes, belt straps, some have cloaks, some have gloves, but really you're adding those details on with the scabbards and the pouches and the vials and the potions and whatever, and that's good. I like that, being able to add the detail, because it's harder to take it away. But that kind of then gives you that blank canvas to go and do what you want. So you could, in theory, if you really wanted to, have a warband that's like Gandalf and Dumbledore with every ilk of Sean Bean ever. So, you know, having Eddard Stark in there, Boromir, Sharp. That could be like, they could be your soldiers in your warband. Or if you really wanted to, you could have 4 warbands from a very, you know, particular wizarding school, and they all have a different badge for their house. And you have some that have Badger House, and you have Snake House, fighting against Griffin House. You could do that if you really wanted to. If you really like your wizarding world and you wanted 4 warbands to represent that, this game works for that. It just allows you to do it. It's great. So, I mean, granted, there are thugs and soldiers and knights, but you can get past that. You can get past that. I would, just to get that flavour in there. Well, there is so much you can do, and I'm kind of digressed from the topic, but I'm just going to give a bit of a preamble as to what is Frostgrave. So a bit of story, if you like. I'm probably going to murder it, so anyone in the comments go, no, that's wrong, Peach. That's wrong. I'm still new to this. This is me discovering Frostgrave. This is me being excited about Frostgrave. I'm excited. I haven't been like this for a little while. Well, probably like a few months since, you know, getting into Silver Bayonet maybe. But hey, I'm excited. So I'm going to give you a bit of a preamble as to the story of Frostgrave. Frostgrave is a game set in the ruins of a vast frozen city formerly known as Felstad, the centre of a magic empire with towering spires, vast libraries, labyrinthine catacombs. Sounds awesome. But then all good things come to an end when some numpty with big spells and, you know, ambitions of grandeur gets a bit carried away and blows it all up. So nice one, mate. That's just wizards. Standard wizard protocol. They just get a bit too big for their boots and then blow stuff up. So with the game system, you're skipping 1,000 years. The frozen city has become more revealed. It started to thaw out, and obviously adventurers are like, ooh, the magic city, we're able to access it, let's get in there and find all the riches. It's full of baddies as well, full of evil beings and undead and this, that and the other. So it's quite a dangerous place to be, but think of all the riches. And that is kind of what your warband is doing. It's going into this ancient vast metropolis of ruins that used to be a great magical empire, and just searching for cool magical stuff and having to fight baddies at the same time. And along the way, you end up having to fight other warbands of wizards from different schools, etc. Which is pretty cool, really. I kind of like that. Just, it feels like more time. Wizardy more time, and I like it. So you've got a bit of an idea of why you're there, what your ambitions are. So you now need to go about building a warband. So how do you go about doing that? What is a warband? What's it comprised of? So the most important thing is a wizard. You need a wizard. That makes sense. It's a game about wizards. Normally, I'm not like a wizardy kind of guy. I tend to be a barbarian or a knight, and I just like to hit stuff with a sword. As you can tell by the big suit of armor behind me. I like plate armor and swords and shields. But wizards, not normally something I kind of like get excited about, but I thought I'd give it a go, read the rules. And you make a wizard. You have, at least in the main core set, 10 disciplines of magic that you pick from. There's definitely more with the add-on sets that you get, all the different campaign books that are out. There's quite a lot. Which is great, so it gives you more scope for journey. But there are 10 wizarding schools, if you like, and I give you a bit of a brief overview of each of those. So the first one is a chromancer or a time rider. Basically, they deal in manipulation of time. It's cool, it's wicked, I like that. Then you've got the elementalists. They're the ones that like fire, earth, wind, water. Fire of Wrath. I mean, you want a fire wizard, you want to paint him red, that's the school you go for. You want a sort of, I don't know, water wizard, paint him blue, he likes water. You want a rock wizard, paint him brown or grey, he likes stones. You know, it's that kind of thing. It's elements, power. Then you have the enchanter, which is sort of like the magical craftsman. They kind of have a cool ability where they can create and animate constructs. So they're kind of hands-on wizards that like to make stuff with their hands that are all very magical. Maybe that's where all the magic items are crafted from, are the enchanters. So I like the idea of enchanters making cool stuff. That's good. Then you have illusionists. These are obviously the ones that deal in illusion. I mean, they're kind of just like you probably better than your average rubbish street magician. That's probably what they are, just street magicians, just with swords and staffs, maybe. I'm probably not selling the illusionist very well. I bet they're great in the game. Absolutely smashing it in the game. Then after that, we've got the necromancer, the bone ticklers, as I like to call them, because they raise the dead. Who doesn't like a wizard who raises the dead? You get to raise zombies and summon things and stuff like that and shoot bone darts. That's why I built a warband about necromancers, because they're mega. I like dead things. After that, you got the sigillist. So the sigillists are more the nerds of the wizarding world. They like books and scrolls. They don't really like fighting. They've got something called Furious Quill as a spell. It's just a quill that just floats around in your face and just really irritates you. It doesn't really hurt you. It just gets in the way. It distracts you from shooting and fighting. It's a great spell. I like it. Just a little quill floating around, getting really in your face. Next up is the Soothsayer. They're kind of just like fighty, more fighty fortune tellers, I guess. I don't really know much about soothsayers. I'm sure there's a lot better than that. Chuck in the comments if you play the game, you're like, soothsayers do this, and the mega peachy, you're wrong. Fortune tellers with staffs and swords. Then you've got the summoner. I mean, they summon stuff, probably baddies, because they summon demons and control imps and stuff like that. So maybe baddies. Maybe do you get good summoners if they're summoning demons? Demons don't sound good. Maybe there's good demons. Maybe demons aren't all bad. Don't know. Then you have the classic trope of the wizard, one that I also like, which is like the Gandalf, the Dumbledore, the Merlin style, which is the Thaumaturge, the Gandalfy Dumbledore wizard type. The goodies, the protectors, the healers, those guys, them. And then last up in the book is the witch, classic sort of witch or warlock if you prefer, kind of live out in the sticks in their little gingerbread houses, collecting animals and bats and shoving children into ovens. That's what the witches are, and they're pretty cool too. I mean, there's going to be many more than that across the different rule sets. I've already seen from the art book there's like loads of different wizard types, so I guess depending on which books you go for and what that campaign setting does, it'll probably introduce new wizard types as well. But there's 10 cool wizarding schools. And the cool thing as well about the wizards, when you pick a wizard, is when you do that, you have sort of an enemy, an adversary wizarding school, which is great. So if you go for the necromancers, the Thaumaturge, the Gandalfy ones, they tend to be your sort of like nemesis, which is quite cool. So I do like that. So every school has like ones that they like and are aligned with, but they also have ones that they hate. It's like, we don't like those. It's just like Slytherin and Gryffindor, really. So, you know, kind of makes sense. Now, when you are building your warband, you've picked your wizard, you know what school he's going to be in. You then have to, you don't have to have an apprentice, but it makes sense to have an apprentice. And the great thing here, from a game mechanics point of view, so there's less sort of like book shuffling and rules thinking and stuff like that, is when you pick an apprentice, he is or she is from the same school and they know the same spells. They're just a bit more naff at casting them. That's it. And I really like that. So you're like, yeah, I've got my necromancer and I've got my apprentice necromancer. They all know the same spells. Simple. You don't have to spend ages working out who's got what, and then just lots of bookkeeping. Just gets a bit much. You have 400 gold coins to spend on your warband after you pick your wizard. 100 of those gold coins will have to go on your apprentice if you want one. It's recommended that you do. You don't have to, but it's recommended that you do. And it kind of makes sense. Not played a game, so I don't understand as of yet the downsides of not taking an apprentice. but a lot of folks say, yeah, definitely take an apprentice. It's just more magic. It's about the magic. And then after, obviously, you'll have 300 gold coins then to spend on warriors. You have soldiers and then specialists. The soldiers tend to be like standard sort of rank and file. You got like infantrymen, which just could be anyone with a lot of these have light armor and like a double-handed weapon, or you got your men-at-arms that have hand weapon and shield. These all have costs. You got warhounds in there as well, which are quite cool. But then you got some free ones as well, like thugs and thieves. And I was like, free? That's a bit mad. What, you know, you could just have an unlimited max. Actually, there's a cap on how many models you can have. 10 is the max you can have in your warbands. So if you want to go for some more expensive characters, then you're going to run out of gold coins pretty quick. So having some rubbish thugs in there is quite a cool option. And that moves on to the specialists, where you get things like knights, templars, crossbowmen, trackers, marksmen, all that kind of stuff. Barbarian is a specialist as well, which I really like. So they're more costly, but they're better in the game. So, you know, you can only have 4 of those in your warband at max, and the rest have to be normal soldiers, which makes sense. And I do like that. So yeah, once you've decided who your wizard is, who his apprentice is, you then get to cherry pick your warband. And what I tend to do is I build extras and then just swap and change between that. So I've got options going, you know what, I'm going to take a marksman this time around. I'm going to pay for a marksman, or the next game I might have accrued some more gold coins and I get this guy. For myself, I imagine I've got an encampment full of soldiers and I just hand pick a few to go on a mission with me. That makes sense from a story point of view for me. So I'm going to talk to you about the 2 warbands I've made. Now, I got a bit excited about doing this. I got a bunch of sprues. A bunch I originally got off eBay, because you can buy like separate sprues off eBay, which was just like me testing the water of what the kits are actually like. And I got a bit carried away and just like went mad. I've used a lot of the wizard bodies in these. I've got like wizards, soldiers, knights. I think I've got some barbarians, but I don't think I've used them yet. But you get like male soldiers, male wizards, female wizards. You only get male knights at the moment, so I don't know if they'll end up doing female knights. But it's cultists, and I want to get hold of some cultists as well. There's a whole load of kits, and they're all interchangeable, which is great. So I got a handful of these, and I built up a necromancer warband. And I just had a lot of fun. You get a massive selection of heads on each of these sets as well. So like the female wizards, you get like, what, 20 heads? And there's a really cool one. I actually put the skull mask on her. Just there was a skull on one of the sprues. I cut it off and stuck it on, just to make it look a little bit more evil, which makes sense because she's a necromancer. And then I just went around just building the rest of the warband. Now I have a theme for these. So I've got my actual necromancer, who is the big boss, you know, the one in charge. Got their apprentice next to them, the learner, carrying the book of spells as well, the book of the dead. Got a sword instead of a staff because it's a hand weapon. Staff don't make no difference to me. And then I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a small cadre of warriors that are elite, that hang around the necromancer, you know, very expensive maybe, or loyal servants. So I've got 2 infantrymen and a Templar, which is the dwarf. And they're basically like the bodyguards of the necromancer. And then I thought, after that, as opposed to like getting like bowmen and like more infantrymen or men-at-arms and this, that, and the other, I'm just gonna have lots of thugs, just cheap hired thugs that are expendable. And that's what the rest of the warband is just thugs. So I've spent a lot of gold coins on some elite troops, and then the rest are just chaff. Just a bunch of chuds that are a bit dumb, eat turnips, don't know much about the world, and just like smack stuff until it's dead. They get equipped with some red and black clothing just to join in. And that was something I wanted to do as well, was like have a coloured theme going for each of the warbands. I'm going to come to something in a minute or two about my 3rd warband, because I want your help, internet. I want your help. But I'm going to move on to my Thaumaturge. Write in the comments how you actually pronounce it. That would be great, because I'm struggling here to pronounce that. It's a good word once you know it. So I've got mine here. They're known as the Grey Conclave. I meant to say also my necromancers are called the Crimson Dawn, not at all taken from Die Hard. So the Grey Conclave. Yes, the Grey Conclave. So I channeled my inner Gandalf the Grey here. That is who the main wizard is. I called him Grunwald the Grey because, you know, I don't want to like infringe on any copyright. Not that you probably could with that. But he's a grey wizard with a pointy hat. He's got another wizard buddy who's got like a big hood. That's his apprentice. And then what I decided to do here was have like some more infantrymen. There's a little bit more specialism in this warband. There's more elite, smarter looking troops because they're goodies. They're from a holy order, maybe, the Grey Conclave, whatever that is. And I've used thugs because I've spent a lot of gold coins on this warband to get things like the infantrymen, a bunch of men-at-arms. I've even got a marksman in those, super expensive. The rest are thugs, but I don't like the term thugs for mine. I've got like what I've called novitiates. They're like sisters of battle, basically, or sisters of Sigma in robes. And they're kind of like warrior nuns, and I've called them novitiates. Stole that name entirely from the Sisters of Battle from Kill Team. Don't care, it's a great name. So that is what this warband is. It's a bunch of basically do-gooders that are going out to find items that are probably evil and bad, and they're going to take them away from the necromancers and the other folks and hide them deep in the vaults of their abbey somewhere. And that is how the Grey Conclave came into being. I like Gandalf, he's cool, and I like Sisters of the Battle, they're cool. Smash them together, and that is the Grey Conclave. I love it. I mean, you can go mad. So, yeah, the help I need, the internet, is I've got a third warband. And I just built a load of random stuff to use as extras. So I've got like these piratey looking guys that will be thugs. Technically, if I use them as thugs, they can't have the shield, but it's just a booklet. I don't really care. I mean, there could be men-at-arms if you want to. Does a little linen shirt count as light armor? Don't know. But again, the rules are loosey-goosey, so you can do what you want with this. But yeah, I've got this warband, I've got a selection of random figures, and I don't know what to do, Maz. I mean, I'm like, been scratching my head, do I just go full generic and just do like a very generic looking wizard, which I can use as anything? Or do I go more down the route of like, this is an elementalist and they're going to be a fire wizard, and these are, I don't know, folks from the red burning sea, and they all have like red clothing. Don't know. So yes, I want your help to help work that out. That would be great. Thank you, internet, for dropping that in the comments and telling me how awesome your ideas are. You're great. So I've been talking a lot about the warbands I've created, the general gist of building a warband. So what I'm going to just throw in now is a quick paint guide on how I painted my necromancers. I'm going to just chuck the one in, and really at the end of the day, this is just a fun paint guide because I just want an excuse to paint another necromancer. It's a second apprentice to use in my games, but there's a few things in this guide that's going to be useful, like painting words on a book, doing like little designs, and just like quick ways of like, you know, getting some color on a model. Doesn't have to be a necromancer, it could be whatever you want it to be. But yeah, quick paint guide on painting a necromancer. Stay tuned. For my black undercoat, the first thing I'm going to do is overbrush with a dark grey. Now I don't have a dark grey as such with my Army Painter range of paints, so I'm just going to mix one using a bit of matte black and a bit of uniform grey. I'll just give me a nice dark charcoaly kind of grey. So once I've mixed that up, I'm then just going to rub that off on some tissue paper. So I'll remove most of the traces like you would with any dry brushing, and then I'm just going to gently flick that over. Now I started with a black undercoat because I can choose here how dark I want to go. I might want to go a bit lighter with the grey, I might want to go a bit heavier. As you can see here, I opted to go for a little bit greyer because that's what I wanted to do. So what I'm going to now do is just purely use uniform grey and dry brush over the edges just to add a bit of definition. Then it's Basilisk Red for any red details. So what I'm going to try and do here is break up the shape a little bit so it's not all completely black. So slightly darker reds for like some of the sleeve and skirt. Again, I need to do a couple of coats of this as well. So just build that over the actual areas you want to pick out. And you might change your mind as you do this process. So there we are, I'll just apply a second coat. So it's a bit more punchy. And again, just to break up the shape a bit more, I'm going for a bit more of a brighter red for the trousers. Now, painting lines or key lines on a model, I'm doing this in the base coat stage because it makes sense. So first of all, I'm just going to roughly sketch out my line. There'll be a few areas where it's a bit more thicker than others. That's fine. I can always correct that in a moment or two. Also, a top tip, use the base of the actual robe to help judge the height of your key line as well. So you can keep a nice consistent line that's the right level all the way across. Then after that, just to tie up any areas, get that black or dark grey mix, and then just go into the areas that are a bit too thick or a bit too wishy-washy or wibbly-wobbly. I always do this in the base coat stage because it makes a lot more sense, because then once I've washed it or whatever, it's less of a faff. Another option, instead of doing the grey tidy up, you can always just broaden your red line out if you think it just could be a bit thicker. That's another way of doing it as well. So sometimes it's tidy up with the black, sometimes it's tidy up with the red. Then it's picking out the brown leathers. So I'm just going to go all the way around looking for belts, pouches, boots, gloves. I'm a bit lazy when it comes to painting skin sometimes, so I'm just going to paint the entire thing as a glove. I know it's a bracer and a hand, but I don't care. It looks cool. It's winter. You're going to get cold hands. So just work your way around. You want to do a couple of coats of this as well, so where it might be a bit too wishy-washy, just do a second coat. Then, because it's a Necromancer spellbook, I think an amethyst colour looks quite cool, so I'm just going to go around with Warlock Magenta and then just pick that out in the book. Again, a couple of coats if needed. Then for the pages, I'm going to use Bony Spikes. Again, this is like a bright sort of bone colour going over black, so again, 2 coats will be needed. Then it's picking out the face. Obviously pick whichever skin colour works for you. I quite like Paratrooper Tan. It's sort of a bit weather beaten and stuff like that. So yeah, we're just going to do a coat of that, or 2 coats of it, because it will need it. Don't worry if you get on the hair, because we can sort the hair out in a moment or two. I do that all the time. I'll save the hair till last. For this reason alone, because I end up getting flesh on it. So now I'm just going to go around with some grey, because they've seen some stuff, this Necromancer has. She's seen things, so she's a bit greyed now. 1,000-yard stare and grey hair. And then picking out any gold details. There's not a lot here really. There's like a little amulet, and I thought instead of doing that silver, I'll just pick that out as gold as well for the actual belt buckle. And then it's wash central. So I'm just going to get some dark tone and apply that all over. Again, you need to do wash here, so heavily apply it first of all. You can always thin it down whilst it's on the model, as in drop a little bit of water on it, or medium, just so if it's pooling in some areas you don't want it to. What I tend to do is when I'm washing it all over, I do it quite heavily, and then after that, I just dry off my brush and then soak off any excess. So you can leave the model as it is, but what I'm going to now do is do some tidying up, which is my next step. So obviously you might make mistakes here like I've just done there, which is fine, just wipe that with your finger or get a brush and dry it off. But I'm just going to get that Basilisk red on the robes and just add a bit more punch to it, where it might have gone a bit splodgy or whatever. So sometimes when you are shading, it can like darken areas down, which is great as well when you're doing tidy ups, because it gives you, it's the same base coat, but applying it a second time after a shade kind of gives you a bit of a nice transition, which is what I'm doing here with the Pure Red as well. I'm just doing little dollops or dots into that key line, so it looks like maybe it's like a pattern in there, maybe it's a bit tatty. It's up to you. Then for a highlight, so I'm going to go to the highlight stage on the red now here. I'm just going to get some Blood Chalice, do my old little jaggedy highlights at the bottom, look a bit frayed. Again, I'm not going to highlight every single fold, just like ones that the light's touching a little bit. Just makes sense. Saves you time as well. I'm going to use that same colour on the amulet. And as I've applied it on the amulet, once it's dry, I'm just going to get some Pure Red and add that in there as well, just for a bit more punch. Then it's onto the skin, and just picking out the raised areas, the extremities, nose, cheeks, jaw, lips, those kind of things. Tidy back up on the old leathers. Again, just the raised areas, I'm not going all the cracks and stuff like that. Again, it gives it a nice transition. Normally I don't go so mad when I'm highlighting my leather belts and stuff like that, but you know, I've only got like, what, 8 or 10 of these in the warband. We're going to get a little bit more love. You don't have to do that, you can just base coat, shade, it's entirely up to you. Now, instead of like looking for a perfect sort of tone to highlight them with, I just thought I'd use that Paratrooper Tan and that Bootstrap colour and mix them together. Normally I don't do mixes, but when I've only got a handful of figures and I'm doing in a batch, it kind of makes sense really. So I'll just mix those 2 colours together, saves time on looking for another paint or buying another paint if you don't have access to it. So I used a flesh here because it adds a bit of warmth to the leather as well, instead of a bone. Again, you can use some jaggedy highlights if you need to. I like to do little scratchy effects on the bag as well, makes it look a bit weather beaten. Then for the pages, so a quick way of doing like text is just to do a couple of horizontal lines of a bone highlight, and from a distance it just looks like faded text. Really quick, easy way of doing it. You can treat it as a highlight if you want to. It might map out the actual text later on, but yeah, if you don't want to do all the little black lines, it's a good way of doing it. Then I'm going to highlight the hair. I'm just literally using the same colour, which is uniform grey, but because I've got that shade on it, it looks a bit darker, so I don't need a million paints to do this. And just use a bit of black for the eyes. Hold your breath when doing that. It can be quite tricky. Then I'm going to use some of that Basilisk Red, slightly thinned down for the lips. Again, it might splodge here and there. Because it's a Necromancer, I thought I'd just drop a little bit under the eyes, just look a bit sunken, not had much sleep, maybe a bit evil. Now to make my black robes look a bit more tatty and old, what I'm going to do is get some Paratrooper Tan and mix that into that dark mix that I did at the start. You could do it just into grey if you wanted to, or you can find some bone tone and do it that way instead. It's entirely up to you, but I just think it gives a nice sort of like faded kind of look as well on the extremities. Because, you know, it is a bit of a post-apocalyptic frozen environment that they're in, so they're not going to have like super pristine clothes. They are going to be a bit tatty. Again, just picking out the odd highlight, not going mad. And of course, the jaggedy highlights on the hem of any kind of robe always looks cool. Can't forget the hood. So next up, to do the text on the book, I'm going to get some matte black. I'm just going to thin it down with some water. I'm using like 3 paintbrushes of water here to 1 paintbrush of black. And then once I've got that mix and I'm happy with it, just get your brush to a nice point, and then I'm just going to do like little wiggles and dollops almost. Being a lefty, I'm kind of going from right to left here because it's just a bit easier, but it's whatever works for you. I'm not doing lots of text, just like a couple little bits. Also, I thought I'd add a little drop cap because it looks fancy. I'm not actually writing a letter in there, I'm just doing a little bit of a block from a distance. It's to give you the impression. And the other page, it's Necromancer. Thought I'd stick a skull on there. So it looks a bit like a mushroom at the moment, like a mushroom cloud or a tree. And then I'll just like work into that with a little bit of bone after, but let's get some text on there as well. Again, this is just me playing around. I like doing freehand. I think that's the downside here. I like to do this kind of stuff. So I'm just gonna get some bone now, just drop in some eyes, to try and make it look like a skull from a distance. And then some colour into that drop cap as well. So it looks fancy, and on the skull. It's an evil book. At this point, I thought that robe at the front could do with something else. So I thought, normally I'd do this in the base coat stage, obviously, but it was a on reflection kind of thing. So I got some of that bone, thinned it down, and decided to do a bit of a key line on the red robe at the front. This was more artistic license and later on choice. Be careful, like I've just done there. Sometimes if you're not careful, you can add a bit too much water to your mix and it splodges, but don't stress it, soak it off. And then also to make it look like there's some kind of ancient wording or runes on there, I'm just going to get some Basilisk red and then just do little lines. So from a distance, it may look like there's some kind of text or pattern, or it's a bit faded, whichever. And there we are, my new Necromancer apprentice is done and ready to join the rest of the gang, or just hang around the camp maybe until everyone's dead. But yeah, wicked. Well, I threw in a cheeky little paint guide for a wizard or a Necromancer apprentice. Got a spare one now in case the first one dies. Wicked. So we're going to move on to talking about spells. Now, spells are a key ingredient of Frostgrave, at least reliably informed. As time of recording, I've not played a game, but I've been told they're key. It's about wizards. Of course spells are really important. Now, when you pick your wizard, we're going to use our Necromancer as the example. You have to pick 8 spells. 3 need to be from your discipline, so 3 necromantic spells. Makes sense. There's like summon, like raise zombie, control undeads, summon a weird skull that floats around, which is quite cool. Bone dart, casting darts at people. So you get to pick from that selection of 8 spells. You get to pick 3 of them. Then you have aligned schools, so ones that you're buddies with to a certain degree, and you have to pick 1 from each of one of those. So you have 3 aligned schools, and you have to pick a spell from each of those. So that brings you up to 6 spells now, because you've got 3 for your discipline, 1 for each of those. And then you get to pick 2 spells from neutral schools. The neutral schools are ones that you're just indifferent about. You're not mates with, you don't hate. They're just there. And that brings you up to 8 spells. You get obviously good benefits for casting spells that your own discipline. You have some slight negatives for casting the aligned ones, a little bit more negative for the neutral ones. And for whatever reason, if you ever come across a spell or have a spell, access to a spell that is from the ones you hate, you're probably not going to get it off. So that's quite cool. It's almost like, oh no, I don't want to touch the Thaumaturgy spells at all. Oh no. So I get it. Right, so yeah, spells. Spells are cool. There's a lot to choose from. Each discipline has 8, and you have to pick 3 for your wizard that's from your own. But then that just opens the field to like loads of cool choices. I guess you can be more tactical, swap and change between games maybe as to what your spells are. So get a bit of a flavour for what they all do. I love the fact you can just summon random creatures as well. So if you go for like the witch, you can summon an animal. Some of these are done outside of the game. So you do it like when you're in your encampment, you can like summon a wolf or a bat or whatever. And it's the same for like the necromancers that can summon a zombie. So it kind of gives you that extra sort of like, oh, I'm going to convert a cool zombie. Oh, this character died a few games ago, so I'm just going to raise him up as a dead version. I really like that. So, and same for like the enchanters can animate a construct, so you can have, and you have to roll to see what the construct is. Same for demons, you get to roll to see what level of demon it is. It could be an imp, it could be like a bit of a mid-range sort of warrior knight demon, or it could be a big badass demon, depending on the dice roll you make. So I kind of like that. It adds a bit of randomness to your summoning. Right, you've picked your warband, you know what your spells are, you know what your school is. So now it's to move on to actually playing some games with said warband. And there's 2 things I want to pick out with this side of the game, is the turn phases, how they work, that's just a really interesting mechanic, and the solo play element as well, which also interests me quite a lot. So I'm going to look at the turn sequence of Frostgrave. So I'm used to game systems where you have like, you go first, do all your stuff, your opponent then goes, they do all their stuff. Or like Warcry, where it's more, you activate a character, they activate a character, you activate a character, they activate a character, so on and so forth, until everyone's activated characters, turn ends, start again. It's cool, I like that kind of activation system. With Frostgrave, it's a little bit different. You have the wizard phase, so whoever's got initiative, you basically roll off to see who gets the initiative, who gets to do their thing first in that turn. Let's say I've got initiative, I get to activate my wizard. If he can see any of his soldiers around him, you can activate up to 3 of those as long as he can see them and they're within a certain radius. So he then goes off, does his thing, a couple of warriors do some stuff with him. Then your opponent does their wizard phase. So you've got this ad hoc thing going on, but it's like groups, group activation in a simplistic way of describing it, I suppose. So you activate a group, which is the wizard, then the opponent does the same, then you activate your apprentice. Very similar to the wizard phase, the only difference is it's your apprentice and you can't activate figures that have already been done. So anyone else that's within a radius of your apprentice can then do their thing, your opponent does the same. Then you go on to the soldier phase, so any soldiers that are on the outskirts that haven't been activated get to do all their stuff and your opponent does it. Then you have something called the creature phase. So in the game, not only are you dealing with an opposing wizard force, but we also have like random monsters wandering around the battlefield doing things as well. And they're activated by, there's like a small sort of rule system where it's like, can they see the enemy? Yes, they move towards it. Are they in combat? Yes, then fight. They have to like fight the thing with the lowest amount of hit points because it's easy to kill, this, that, and the other. So basically keep killing a thing until it's dead, then move on to the next thing, keep hitting that until that's dead. I kind of like that. And then that kind of flows into the solo play element. Now, as a young kid, a long time ago, when I was very young, in the middle of the countryside, I used to play games with my dad and my brothers and my sister. And it was great, but they didn't always want to play games. They weren't always in the mood, or they just weren't around. And I would just stare longingly out of my bedroom window at your far yonder fields, just hoping that maybe there'd be a hobbyist running across those fields with a figure case in hand, coming to play a game with me, like Rohan coming to Gondor's aid. But that never happened. That never happened, because that's not how life works. Living in the middle of the countryside, it's a bit hard to get to your local game store. So you have to try and entertain yourself somehow. And, you know, I kind of made up rules and tried to unbiasedly play a game against one side versus the other, but you can't really do it unbiasedly. You've always got a favourite and it's not really the best way to play a game. But somehow we've got a set of rules here, which is solo play. And I'm like, how does this work? And what's really interesting is you are playing the same scenario, but as opposed to being an opposing warband, a wizard warband, you are playing against the environment, the actual creatures themselves. Rob calls it player versus environment, which is obviously a great terminology, PvE, also solo play. And that would have been great when I was a kid. And even like, it's perfect for anyone that doesn't have like people within close proximity, or in isolation for whatever reason, or you're just a parent and you don't get much chance to get out. That's the way it is. You know, late night, your baby's asleep, and you think, oh, you know, I'm gonna set up a few figures and have a quick go and see if I can, you know, upgrade my wizard or whatever. And I really like that. And I've not seen many games that do solo games. I mean, there's Execution Force, you've got Silver Tower and Blackstone Fortress, all workshop games. I'm sure there's more, I'm just not aware of them. But it's something that's very new to me. As soon as I saw it in like Silver Bayonet, it was like solo play. I was like, what? Solo play? You can play these games on your own? How does that work? How does that work as a rules mechanic? So I'm really interested by that. Now, as I've said, in the rules, you would remove the opponent warband, and then you're just following the scenario as it is to the letter, because most of the scenario is about gaining treasure, getting treasure. It's about the treasure then getting out. And the creatures will do a thing. And from what Joseph said, it's like actually a lot of the scenarios are quite hard. And really at the end of the day, it's not about staying there, killing everything until it's dead. It's about doing the objective, getting some treasure and getting out. And you're probably going to lose people in the process. But there's other rule sets that have come out that go more into like the solo play. So you've got Perilous Dark, which I recently got because I wanted to discover about the more elements of solo play, and it's got the dungeon crawl thing to it as well. So if you really want to go down the realms of like Warhammer quests, Hero Quest, that kind of thing, you've kind of got that element with Perilous Dark, which I really like. A whole bunch of scenarios. Again, it tweaks the rules a little bit. So as opposed to it being like you do all your steps, so wizard, apprentice, soldiers, then creatures, that kind of gives it a bit of an unfair advantage, and you're probably going to do quite well. That then turns into like you do your entire side, the opponent does their entire side. In Perilous Dark, it kind of throws that in the middle a bit and kind of just changes the orientation of that turn. So you'll have like a wizard phase, then you'll throw in like a creature phase, then an apprentice phase, and a creature phase, and a soldier phase. So it kind of makes it a little bit more engaging and a little bit more threatful as well. So I kind of like that. So Perilous Dark, if you want to go really into solo play, is perfect for that. Now, Mortal Enemies is a great little campaign set where it just throws in, well, a mortal enemy. So, you know, your He-Man to Skeletor kind of dynamic. So whether you're playing against other warbands, you're playing solo games, this guy or warband will just turn up, because it is a small warband. Not only is it like a big bad, but you've got like a small group of people around him. They just rock up from time to time to ruin your day. So if I'm doing solo play, I'm at home, I've got no friends, I've got my necromancers, got them all laid out. I've been doing lots of like player versus environment games. You know, some of them are quite challenging. And then the Grey Wizard turns up and just like, no, you can't have fun raising dead people up. It's not on. And then it becomes like a regular feature. Every so many games, they'll come back and then cause trouble. Eventually, you might be able to kill them. Don't know. But I really like that. I like that dynamic of throwing that in. There's something as well I forgot to mention, which is cooperative play. So if you go down the Perilous Dark route again, you can buddy up with a friend or group of friends if you wanted to. And then you basically have, instead of like a wizard warband, you have like a small of their wizard warband, a small group of your wizard warband dealing with the environment. You just have to make the environment a bit harder, that's all. So I kind of like that. So you can either play against an opponent, play against the environment, or buddies play against the environment together. So lots of options. But it is mind-blowing to think that, how long has wargaming been around? It's been around a long time, and only now I'm starting to see that people are doing like solo games. Now, don't get me wrong, gaming is a social thing. It's great. I love playing with my mates, but sometimes it's just quite nice having like a little mechanic where you know, at night you can just set up a table and then just roll some dice and move some figures. I mean, from my point of view, I want to tell a story as well. So I'm not doing it to like get a sneak win, because who am I beating here? And just beating myself. It's like, sure, great. So for me, after I've painted a warband, I want to play games, and that's not always viable. And I've had this many times where I've like painted collections and just not got around to playing a game. Then I lose the momentum of that collection and I just don't want to do anything with it. I find once I've played a game, I get excited and then add like another unit, play another game, add another unit, play another game, so on and so forth. And I think that solo play element kind of adds that. So for me, certainly, if I've been, you know, building up a couple of warbands and not play the game for a couple of weeks, I might lose the impetus of Frostgrave. But because I've got the solo play element, I can just keep adding to it, make some more mortal enemies, do some dungeon diving. So it's cool. I like that. I'm intrigued by it, and I want to explore it more. But yeah, it's very clever. Good job, Joseph, for not only making a great, robust rule system, but also ability for people to play on their own when they can't get out. That is amazing. And I'm going to throw it out now, but I might use the solo play element to do some fun story narrative driven battle reports for the channel. If that's something you'd want to see, drop it in the comments, because that's something I'd like to do. I like the idea of doing battle reports, and I'm very limited to like tech and space at the moment. But I'm pretty sure I can do a solo play battle report with a camera and a handful of lights and a gaming table, and then just tell a story. Certainly if I did like a Frostgrave story, a Silver Bayonet story, Stargrave story. So because it's a model agnostic rule system, a long time ago, I love the Elder Scrolls, right? There is a game for Skyrim by Modiphius, which is great, but I really like Oblivion as well. There's something, I don't know, really nice about the game Oblivion. And a long time ago, I did a couple of warbands, the intention to do more, and I did a bunch of guards of all the different towns and cities in Oblivion, so the little area of Cyrodiil. So I've got like some Bruma guards, which are like the first ones you come across when you have to go and close the first gate in that game. And then I did some Skingrad guards, which are quite cool because you have to deal with a load of vampires down there as well. And those like Coral, and then Anvil, Shadenal, and all the others, which I can't recall now because it's been so long. Leowind's one as well. Don't know where that just came from. But yes, I started doing like a bunch of guards for that, and then started like adding loads of bandits and characters. I basically was going to make my own game. And I think what's really cool here is I can take the Frostgrave rule system and use that for Oblivion if I wanted to, because you get different disciplines of magic in that game as well, and different races that, you know, are more specialized to certain magic disciplines, because you've got necromancers, you've got illusionists, you've got alteration and all the others, which again can't recall from the top of my head because there's so many. But you could take elements in that. You could literally use this rule system to play Oblivion if you wanted to. But also, on that same vein, I can use these models in this game system. So I've got like these guys in yellow, which kind of fit with the grey wizards because they got accents of yellow. And I've got these black and red guards, which then fit with my necromancers. So if I want to do like a cool sort of narrative, there's a battle going off in the streets and your wizard's got this objective to do and the opposing wizard's got this objective to do. I've got room to do that as well. So I really like that. I've also recently done a video where I paint up a load of War of the Roses stuff. I used that was kind of my first introduction to painting a Frostgrave miniature as well, because in that I paint like 3 different figures: a War of the Roses figure, a Frostgrave miniature, and a Citadel Citizen Sigma figure. And as a warband itself, they're quite cool. The Citizen Sigma guy is quite big, but I don't care because he's just like big and tall and strong. All come in different shapes and sizes, as I mentioned in that video. But what it did is I was thinking, you know what you could do? You could do like a low sort of fantasy level War of the Roses. Maybe the Plantagenets and the Tudors have access to wizards, and you know it's kind of like Game of Thrones, but actually history as well. So you know, chucking a wizard in with my Tudors, chucking a wizard in with my Plantagenets, and then just playing War of the Roses, but with like a little magical effect thrown in there as well. And then of course I'm a big fan of sword and sorcery, and the rule system is very adaptable to that. So I could have a wizard and an apprentice sort of shaman and their barbarian sort of, I guess, hanger on, and then a bunch of Conans and Red Sonjas to hang around them. That make, you know, reenacting the tales of Hyboria. I could do that with this rule system as well. So what I'm basically saying is, because it's model agnostic, it's a great rule system that's not specific to one IP. You can do what you want, and I love that. You've got your IP, obviously, which is Felstad or Frostgrave, and then all the cool warbands around it and the different schools, but you can do what you want with that as well, which is the beauty of these kind of games. So regardless of what you take away from this video, it's very clear, at least from a community point of view, that this game is really well loved. It's got the same kind of love that like Mordheim has and Middle-earth strategy battle game, which are also great games as well. If you manage to get this far and you're like, Peter's not said anything about Mordheim and Middle-earth, it's about Frostgrave this video, but I do love those games too. Now, it annoys me that it's taken me 10 years to discover this game. It's been out for like, what, 10 years? Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but from what I understand, it's about 10 years it's been out. I've only just discovered it. And I think part of that is things like the powerhouses that are out there. Workshop is a prime example. Workshop has its place because it introduces new people into the hobby. It's great for like getting people into the community, and they then move off to do these peripherals and this, that, and the other. It's a great sort of beacon of people coming into wargaming. But at the same time, it's a double-edged sword because it's so big and so unwieldy and so popular that all these other cool game systems get forgotten or hidden, which is sad, really. Because I've worked for Workshop for years. Now I've said it millions of times, but during that time, I did lots of hobby that wasn't Workshop related. I used to go to Salute all the time, and Partisan and all the other games conventions. And I knew at the time, for a long period of time, what all the different game systems were, but weirdly I seem to have like slowly but surely dropped off and got more focused on just the Workshop related stuff, which is, you know, on me really, not anyone else's fault. That's just through choice. But what it did do is it made me very blinkered as to what else is in the community, and I think that's the shame. And obviously with videos like this probably won't perform very well in comparison to a Workshop related video. You know, that's the sad reality of it. But I want to be putting it out there that there are these kind of games out there, these boutique games, indie games that are great and well written and loved. You can tell that the community love them. The author has put heart and soul into it, because it's not just a game to sell miniatures. They've made a game that's the best game they can possibly make, and then miniatures are made around it, which I think should be the right way to do it. Regardless, It'd be nice to know what your thoughts are. Do you like Frostgrave? Is it a good game? I think it is. I like it. What other good games are out there? Throw them in there as well. I mean, I'm aware of obviously like the slightly bigger war games that Joseph's done, which is going to be Rangers of Shadow Deep and Oathmark. So I'm interested in looking at those. But yeah, do throw in your suggestions of some of the more obscure games that might be out there, because it's always worth checking them out. And that's kind of what I want to use this platform for as well, is to highlight those companies and games, because, you know, it took me so long to discover this, and I'd say in the last 2-3 months I became aware of Frostgrave. It's mad, isn't it? Stupid. Well, as always, thank you to these people for the support. You guys are amazing. You too can be a patron. Do consider joining it. We have a great community. If you are part of the Patreon as well, obviously UK based, but I am going to be running a thing called PeachCon. Dates to be confirmed, but you can only join that if you're a Patreon. So it's worth, if you just want to come down to Derby and chat to Peachy in some random event hall and just have fun playing games and doing stuff. That is what PeachCon's going to be about. So yeah, do check out the Discord and the Patreon for that. But until our next time, I'll see you around. I'm going to go off and paint my 3rd warband now. Well, I'm not going to wait until this video goes out, and then you guys are going to tell me how to paint it, because I still can't decide what colours to do. I might just build some more warbands. I might build a 4th and a 5th warband. There you are. I've got some gnolls. They're right there. Got some barbarians. I'm going to do that. Anyway, bye.